Nothing prepares you for the moment when you realize the endless ribbon of asphalt stretching ahead isn't taking you towards safety. It's leading you deeper into a nightmare. The headlights in my rearview mirror had been following me for over 200 miles on Interstate 80 through the Nevada desert, maintaining the exact same distance behind my car regardless of how fast I drove or how many times I changed lanes. It was 3:30 in the morning, and the highway was virtually empty except for the occasional long-haul trucker and whatever was in that car behind me, matching my every move with a precision that made my skin crawl. When I sped up to 85 miles per hour, the headlights stayed exactly the same distance behind me. When I slowed down to 60, they slowed down too, never getting closer, never falling back, just maintaining that constant, unnatural distance that suggested whoever was driving that car was more interested in following me than reaching any actual destination. I tried taking random exits to see if they would continue past me, but every time I left the highway, the headlights would follow, and when I got back on the interstate, they would resume their position exactly where they had been before, as if the driver knew my route better than I did and was anticipating my every move. My name is Jake, and that night taught me that our interstate highway system isn't just America's circulatory system. It's a hunting ground where predators can stalk their prey for hundreds of miles without witnesses, where help is always too far away, and where the very isolation that makes long-distance driving peaceful can become your worst enemy. Ever wondered why some truckers refuse to drive certain routes after dark? Ever noticed how some rest stops feel wrong even when they're crowded? Drop a comment below if you felt that primal fear when you realize you're being hunted on the open road, because tonight I'm sharing 3 true accounts that will make you question every mile marker you pass and every set of headlights in your mirror. These aren't urban legends designed to scare travelers. These are real experiences from real drivers who learned that when you're alone on a dark highway, traveling at high speeds through remote areas where help is hours away, you can encounter situations that will make you question the safety of interstate travel and the motives of other drivers who share the road with you. Maria had logged over 1 million miles during her 10-year career as a pharmaceutical sales representative, crisscrossing the Midwest between medical practices and hospitals separated by hundreds of miles of interstate highway. She was comfortable with long-distance driving, night travel, and the challenges of navigating unfamiliar routes in all weather conditions. Her demanding travel schedule often involved driving through remote areas during overnight hours, when traffic was light and she could make good time between appointments. Her route from Chicago to Kansas City on Interstate 70 was familiar territory, a highway she'd traveled dozens of times and considered one of the safer, more reliable routes in her territory. The 8-hour drive was routine, planned to arrive in Kansas City early morning for a series of medical practice visits. She was driving her reliable Honda Accord, carrying her usual complement of pharmaceutical samples and sales materials essential to her work. The trip began normally, leaving Chicago around midnight to take advantage of light traffic and cooler temperatures. Interstate 70 through Illinois and Missouri was familiar territory with well-maintained rest stops, reliable cell phone coverage, and predictable road conditions that made long-distance driving routine for experienced travelers like herself. For the first 3 hours, everything proceeded exactly as Maria expected. Light traffic, good road conditions, and the peaceful highway environment that made night driving pleasant and productive. Maria maintained a steady 75 miles per hour, slightly above the posted limit, but within the range typically tolerated by law enforcement during overnight hours when traffic was light. But as Maria passed through central Illinois and approached the Missouri border, she began to notice a vehicle in her rearview mirror that was exhibiting behavior that made her increasingly uncomfortable. The vehicle appeared to be a dark-colored sedan that had begun following her around Springfield, Illinois, maintaining a consistent distance behind her car. That suggested the driver was deliberately matching her speed and route, rather than simply traveling in the same direction by coincidence. Maria's initial reaction was to assume the vehicle was simply another long-distance traveler going in the same direction and maintaining similar speed, which was common on interstate highways where drivers often found themselves traveling in loose groups for extended distances. But as the miles passed and the vehicle continued to maintain its exact position behind her, Maria began to realize that the driver's behavior was too precise and consistent to be explained by normal highway travel patterns. When Maria adjusted her speed to test whether the following vehicle was simply maintaining highway pace or deliberately tracking her movements, the results confirmed her growing suspicion that she was being followed by someone whose intentions were potentially dangerous. When she increased her speed to 80 miles per hour, the following vehicle immediately matched her new pace, maintaining the exact same distance. When she slowed down to 65, the vehicle slowed down as well, never getting closer or falling back, maintaining that constant, unnatural distance that suggested sophisticated surveillance or stalking behavior. Subscribe right now if you've ever tested whether someone was following you and discovered they were matching your every move, because what Maria discovered about her pursuer's knowledge of her route proved that some highway stalkers do their homework before the hunt begins. Maria's concern escalated when she realized the following vehicle was not only matching her speed, but also anticipating her lane changes and route decisions in ways that suggested the driver had extensive knowledge of her travel patterns or was using some kind of tracking technology to monitor her movements. When Maria changed lanes to pass slower traffic, the following vehicle would change lanes at exactly the same time, maintaining its position even when there was no traffic-related reason for the lane change. When Maria took an exit to test whether the vehicle would continue past her, the following vehicle took the same exit, and when she returned to the highway, it resumed its exact position behind her, as if the detour had been planned and anticipated. The precision and persistence of the following behavior made Maria realize she was dealing with someone who was specifically targeting her rather than engaging in random highway harassment. The driver seemed to have detailed knowledge of her route and schedule, suggesting that her movements had been monitored and planned for in advance, which raised terrifying questions about who might be following her and why they had chosen her as a target for this sophisticated stalking behavior. Maria's attempts to lose the following vehicle by taking unexpected exits and changing her route were unsuccessful, as the driver seemed to anticipate her evasive maneuvers and was able to maintain surveillance despite her efforts to break free from the pursuit. When Maria took a random exit in a small Missouri town, hoping to find a police station or well-lit public area where she could seek help, the following vehicle took the same exit and continued to maintain its position even as she drove through unfamiliar streets. The small town was largely deserted at 4 in the morning, with no police station visible and no businesses open that would provide the kind of public safety and assistance that Maria desperately needed. The following vehicle continued to track her movements through the empty streets, maintaining its distance but clearly demonstrating that the driver was committed to continuing the pursuit, regardless of where Maria tried to go. Maria's escape came when she spotted a 24-hour truck stop on the outskirts of town, with multiple big rigs parked in the lot and bright lighting that would provide witnesses and potential assistance. Maria pulled into the truck stop parking lot and positioned her car near the main entrance where she would be visible to other travelers and employees, hoping that the public setting would discourage her pursuer from approaching directly. When Maria parked and looked back toward the highway, she discovered that the following vehicle had stopped at the edge of the truck stop property, but had not entered the parking lot or approached her location. The vehicle remained stationary for several minutes, as if the driver was observing her and deciding whether to continue the pursuit or abandon the effort now that Maria had reached a public location with potential witnesses. After about 10 minutes, the following vehicle drove away, disappearing back onto the interstate and leaving Maria alone with no explanation for why she had been followed for over 200 miles, or who had been driving the vehicle that had tracked her movements with such precision and persistence. Maria remained at the truck stop for over an hour, talking to truck drivers and employees about her experience and waiting to make sure that her pursuer had actually left the area. When Maria finally continued her trip to Kansas City, she took a different route and maintained constant communication with colleagues and family members who could track her progress and provide assistance if she encountered any further problems. She never discovered the identity of her pursuer or the reason for the sophisticated stalking behavior that had turned a routine business trip into a terrifying ordeal. Maria reported the incident to law enforcement in both Illinois and Missouri, but without a license plate number or clear description of the following vehicle, there was little that police could do to investigate the matter. Maria learned that similar reports of highway stalking and pursuit behavior were not uncommon, particularly involving women traveling alone on interstate highways through remote areas where help was far away and surveillance could be conducted without witnesses. But if you think a single stalker represents the worst threat you can face on a remote highway, wait until you hear what David encountered in the New Mexico desert. Because sometimes the hunters travel in packs, and sometimes their coordination suggests training and resources that go far beyond simple criminal opportunism. David was a college professor driving from Denver to Phoenix to attend an academic conference, taking Interstate 25 south through New Mexico before connecting to Interstate 40 west through Arizona. He was an experienced long-distance driver who regularly traveled to conferences and research locations across the western United States, comfortable with the challenges of desert highway driving, including extreme temperatures, limited services, and long stretches of road through sparsely populated areas. David's route through New Mexico and Arizona was familiar territory that he had traveled multiple times for academic and personal purposes. He was aware of the need to maintain adequate fuel, water, and emergency supplies when driving through desert regions, where services were separated by long distances and extreme weather conditions could create dangerous situations for unprepared travelers. The trip began normally, with David leaving Denver in the early morning to take advantage of cooler temperatures and good visibility for the long drive through mountainous and desert terrain. The route through Colorado and northern New Mexico was familiar and comfortable, with good road conditions, adequate services, and scenic mountain and desert landscapes that made long-distance driving enjoyable. But as David entered the more remote sections of Interstate 25 in central New Mexico, where services were limited and the highway passed through long stretches of empty desert with minimal traffic and no visible development, he began to encounter a situation that challenged his understanding of highway safety and the behavior of other drivers on interstate highways through remote areas. David noticed that he was being followed by a convoy of 3 vehicles that had begun tracking his movements around the time he passed through Albuquerque and had maintained a consistent formation behind his car for over 100 miles through increasingly remote desert terrain. The convoy consisted of 3 dark-colored SUVs traveling in a tight formation about a quarter-mile behind David's car, maintaining a precise distance and speed that suggested coordinated movement rather than coincidental travel by independent drivers who happened to be going in the same direction. The vehicles were too far away for David to see details about their occupants or license plates, but their coordinated behavior and persistent following pattern made it clear that they were working together and that their presence behind David's car was intentional. Ring that notification bell if you've ever realized you weren't just being followed by one vehicle, but by an entire coordinated team, because what David discovered about this convoy's capabilities proved that some highway predators operate with military-level precision and planning. David's initial assumption was that the convoy might be law enforcement vehicles conducting some kind of surveillance or investigation that happened to involve the same route he was traveling, but the vehicles showed no identifying markings or emergency equipment that would indicate official law enforcement status. The SUVs also made no attempt to stop David or signal for him to pull over, which would be expected behavior if they were law enforcement officers who needed to interact with him for legitimate purposes. As the convoy continued to follow David through increasingly remote desert areas where other traffic was minimal and services were non-existent, David began to realize that he was dealing with a situation that was potentially dangerous, and that required careful planning and decision-making to ensure his safety and escape from whatever the convoy's occupants had planned for him. David's attempts to determine the convoy's intentions by varying his speed and route were met with responses that confirmed his suspicion that he was being deliberately targeted by people who had extensive knowledge of the highway system and experience with pursuit and surveillance techniques. When David increased his speed to test the convoy's reaction, all three vehicles immediately matched his new pace, maintaining their formation and distance with military-like precision that suggested professional training or extensive experience with coordinated vehicle operations. When David took an exit in a small New Mexico town, hoping to find law enforcement assistance, or at least witnesses who could observe the convoy's behavior and provide testimony, if the situation escalated to a criminal incident, all three vehicles took the same exit and continued to maintain their surveillance despite the increased risk of detection and identification that came with following David into a populated area. The small town where David sought refuge was typical of rural New Mexico communities, with a population of a few hundred people, limited services, and no visible law enforcement presence that would provide immediate assistance or protection against the convoy that was continuing to track his movements through the town as streets. David drove slowly through the town, looking for a police station, sheriff's office, or other law enforcement facility where he could report the pursuit and seek protection, but he found no official presence and no businesses that would provide the kind of assistance he needed. The convoy maintained its surveillance throughout David's drive through the town, with the three vehicles positioning themselves at different locations to maintain visual contact with David's car, while avoiding the kind of obvious following behavior that might attract attention from local residents or business owners who might report suspicious activity to law enforcement authorities. The coordination and tactical awareness demonstrated by the convoy's occupants suggested that they had extensive experience with surveillance and pursuit operations, and that they were prepared to continue tracking David regardless of his attempts to seek help or escape from their attention. David's escape came when he spotted a Border Patrol checkpoint on Interstate 25 south of the town where he had sought refuge. With multiple law enforcement vehicles and officers conducting routine inspections of vehicles traveling through the area, David drove directly to the checkpoint and reported the convoy's pursuit behavior to the Border Patrol agents, who immediately took the report seriously and began coordinating with other law enforcement agencies to locate and investigate the three vehicles that had been following David through remote desert areas. When David looked back toward the highway from the Border Patrol checkpoint, he discovered that the convoy had disappeared, apparently abandoning their pursuit when they realized that David had reached a location with substantial law enforcement presence, and that their activities would be subject to official investigation and potential criminal charges. The Border Patrol agents conducted a thorough search of the area but found no trace of the three SUVs or their occupants, suggesting that the convoy had extensive knowledge of the local area and established escape routes that allowed them to disappear quickly when their operations were threatened by law enforcement intervention. The Border Patrol investigation revealed that similar convoy pursuit incidents had been reported by other travelers in the same area, with a pattern of coordinated vehicle harassment targeting drivers who were traveling alone through remote desert sections of Interstate 25 and other highways in the region. The incidents appeared to be related to criminal organizations that used highway pursuit and intimidation tactics to identify potential victims for robbery, kidnapping, or other serious crimes that could be conducted in remote areas where law enforcement response would be delayed and witnesses would be unavailable. But even coordinated criminal convoys seem almost mundane compared to what Lisa experienced on Interstate 15 through the Mojave Desert. Because sometimes the threat isn't human at all. Sometimes it is something that can reach into your vehicle, is electronic systems, and turn your own car against you in ways that defy every law of physics and technology you thought you understood. Lisa was a real estate agent driving from Los Angeles to Las Vegas on Interstate 15 for a weekend business conference. taking a route she had traveled many times for both business and personal purposes. She was comfortable with desert highway driving and familiar with the challenges of traveling through the Mojave Desert, including extreme temperatures, limited services, and the need to maintain adequate fuel and emergency supplies when driving through remote areas where mechanical problems could leave travelers stranded for hours in dangerous conditions. Lisa's trip began on a Friday evening. Leaving Los Angeles around 6 o'clock to avoid the worst of rush hour traffic and arrive in Las Vegas in time for dinner and an evening networking event that was part of the real estate conference she was attending. Interstate 15 between Los Angeles and Las Vegas was a familiar route that Lisa had driven dozens of times, and she was aware of the best places to stop for fuel and food, as well as the sections of highway that required extra attention due to steep grades, construction zones, or challenging driving conditions. The drive through the Mojave Desert was typically peaceful and scenic, with dramatic mountain and desert landscapes that made the journey enjoyable despite the remote location and limited services available along the route. Lisa was driving her reliable BMW sedan, which was well suited to highway driving and equipped with navigation and communication systems that would allow her to summon help if she encountered any problems during the journey. But as Lisa entered the most remote section of Interstate 15, where the highway passed through uninhabited desert areas with no services or development visible for miles in any direction, she began to experience a situation that challenged her understanding of highway safety and made her question the reliability of her vehicle and the safety of traveling alone through such isolated areas. Lisa's car began to exhibit mechanical problems that seemed to appear suddenly and without warning, despite the fact that the vehicle had been recently serviced and had shown no signs of mechanical issues during her regular driving around Los Angeles. The problems began with the car's electrical system, with dashboard warning lights flickering on and off in patterns. That didn't correspond to any known mechanical issues or warning systems that Lisa was familiar with from her years of driving the same vehicle. The radio would turn on and off by itself, cycling through stations and producing static and interference that made it impossible to receive clear signals from any broadcasting stations, even though Lisa was within range of Las Vegas radio stations that should have provided strong, clear reception. Hit that like button and share this with someone who's experienced unexplained car problems in remote areas, because what Lisa discovered about the geographic concentration of these malfunctions suggests that some places on our highway system are affected by forces that can reach into our vehicles and manipulate them in ways that challenge everything we think we know about automotive technology. The car's air conditioning system began to malfunction, alternating between producing ice-cold air and hot air without any adjustment to the controls, creating uncomfortable temperature fluctuations that made driving difficult and suggested that multiple vehicle systems were experiencing simultaneous failures that were unlikely to occur naturally in a well-maintained vehicle. The navigation system began to display incorrect information, showing Lisa's location as being in places she had never been and providing directions to destinations that she had not programmed into the system. As the mechanical problems multiplied and became more severe, Lisa began to realize that her vehicle was experiencing the kind of comprehensive system failure that could leave her stranded in the middle of the Mojave Desert with no way to summon help and no protection from the extreme temperatures and dangerous conditions that could be fatal for someone who was not prepared for desert survival. Lisa's concern about her vehicle's mechanical problems was compounded when she began to notice that other vehicles on the highway were exhibiting similar strange behavior, with cars and trucks that appeared to be experiencing electrical problems, erratic movement, and other signs of mechanical distress that suggested a widespread phenomenon affecting multiple vehicles in the same area. The affected vehicles would slow down, speed up, or change lanes without apparent reason, creating dangerous driving conditions and suggesting that whatever was causing Lisa's car problems was also affecting other travelers on the same section of highway. The situation became more alarming when Lisa realized that the mechanical problems affecting her vehicle and others on the highway seemed to be concentrated in a specific geographic area, with vehicles experiencing normal operation before entering a particular section of desert and then developing multiple system failures that would resolve themselves once they had passed through the affected zone. The pattern suggested that some kind of external interference was affecting vehicle electrical and mechanical systems in ways that could not be explained by normal mechanical failures or environmental conditions. Lisa's attempts to understand and address her vehicle's problems were complicated by the fact that the mechanical issues seemed to be affecting her car's safety and control systems in ways that made continued driving dangerous and potentially fatal. The steering became unresponsive at times, requiring extra effort to maintain control of the vehicle, and the brakes would occasionally engage without Lisa pressing the brake pedal, causing sudden deceleration that could have resulted in accidents if other vehicles had been following closely behind her. The most disturbing aspect of the mechanical problems was the realization that they seemed to be designed to force Lisa to stop her vehicle in the remote desert area, where she would be vulnerable to whatever external force was causing the widespread system failures affecting multiple vehicles. The problems were severe enough to make continued driving dangerous, but they were not complete failures that would leave her stranded immediately, creating a situation where she would be forced to choose between continuing to drive an unreliable vehicle or stopping in a remote area where she would be isolated and defenseless. Lisa's decision to continue driving despite her vehicle's problems was motivated by her understanding that stopping in the remote desert area would leave her more vulnerable than continuing to drive toward Las Vegas, where she could seek assistance and safety even if her car experienced complete failure. She maintained communication with friends and family members through her cell phone when coverage was available, providing updates on her location and situation so that help could be summoned if she failed to reach her destination, or if her vehicle broke down completely. As Lisa approached the end of the affected zone where vehicles were experiencing mechanical problems, her car's systems began to return to normal operation, with the electrical problems resolving themselves and the mechanical issues disappearing as suddenly as they had appeared. The transition from malfunctioning systems to normal operation was so abrupt and complete that it seemed impossible for the problems to have been caused by normal mechanical failures or environmental conditions that would typically require repair or maintenance to resolve. Lisa's arrival in Las Vegas was accompanied by the complete restoration of her vehicle's normal operation, with all systems functioning perfectly and no evidence of the mechanical problems that had threatened her safety during the drive through the remote desert section of Interstate 15. When Lisa had her car inspected by a mechanic in Las Vegas, no mechanical problems or system failures could be identified, and the vehicle showed no signs of the electrical and mechanical issues that had affected its operation during the desert portion of her journey. Lisa's research into her experience revealed that similar incidents had been reported by other travelers on the same section of Interstate 15, with a pattern of unexplained mechanical and electrical problems affecting vehicles in a specific geographic area of the Mojave Desert. The incidents were often attributed to electromagnetic interference from military installations or experimental facilities in the area, but no official explanation was ever provided for the widespread vehicle problems that affected travelers on a regular basis. These three accounts from interstate highways across America reveal a disturbing truth about long-distance travel. The roads we depend on to connect our communities and enable commerce and personal mobility can become stages for encounters that challenge our understanding of highway safety and the motives of other people who share the road with us. Maria's experience with sophisticated highway stalking in the Midwest proved that some predators can track their victims with precision that suggests advanced planning and surveillance capabilities. David's encounter with a coordinated convoy pursuit in the Southwest demonstrated that some criminal organizations operate with military-level coordination and tactical awareness that makes them extremely dangerous to lone travelers in remote areas. Lisa's vehicle system failures in the Mojave Desert revealed that some sections of our highway system are affected by forces that can manipulate automotive technology in ways that challenge our understanding of how vehicles operate and what can cause them to malfunction in such specific and coordinated ways. The most chilling aspect of these accounts isn't the individual incidents themselves. It's the realization that in each case, the victims were traveling on familiar routes that they had used safely many times before, and that the threats they encountered were sophisticated, coordinated, and specifically designed to exploit the vulnerability of lone travelers in remote areas where help was far away and witnesses were unavailable. Maria had no warning that her routine business trip would put her in the crosshairs of a stalker who had done extensive research on her travel patterns and was prepared to follow her for hundreds of miles through multiple states. David had no indication that his academic conference trip would attract the attention of a criminal organization that operated with the kind of coordination and tactical awareness typically associated with military or law enforcement operations. Lisa had no clue that her weekend business trip would take her through an area where unknown forces could reach into her vehicle as electronic systems and manipulate them in ways that threatened her safety and challenged her understanding of automotive technology and highway travel. If you're currently planning long-distance drives, especially through remote areas during overnight hours, if you've ever felt followed or threatened while traveling on interstate highways, or if you've experienced unexplained mechanical problems in specific geographic areas, trust your instincts and take precautions to ensure your safety. Subscribe and turn on notifications if these stories have opened your eyes to dangers you never considered, and remember that sometimes the most dangerous situations develop on the roads we consider safest and most familiar. Drop a comment below sharing your own highway experiences, because documenting these incidents might be the only way to understand the full scope of the threats that face travelers on our interstate highway system. The next time you're driving alone on a dark interstate, remember these stories and stay alert to the behavior of other vehicles, the reliability of your own car's systems, and the importance of maintaining communication with people who can track your progress and provide assistance if you encounter problems. Before you go, check out the playlist in the description for more true highway horror stories that will change how you see long-distance travel forever. Because in the end, the most terrifying realization isn't that these things happened, it's that they're still happening right now on highways across the country to travelers who have no idea that their routine journey might become a nightmare that will change how they think about the open road forever. Drive carefully out there and remember, the next time you see headlights in your rearview mirror that seem to be following too closely or maintaining too consistent a distance, ask yourself if you're really sharing the road with another traveler, or if you've become the target of someone whose intentions are far more sinister than simply reaching their destination. Because sometimes the most dangerous part of any journey is not the destination. It's discovering that you're not traveling alone and that the other travelers sharing your route have plans for you that you never agreed to be part of.